everyone, it's Sarah from Apricot Polka Dot, and I have a really fun Christmas craft for you today. We are going to be making rope wrapped candy canes, and these are so easy and fun. They use a technique that I used in my wrapped rainbows. There's a tutorial on my website for those, and it's really the same technique, but we're just making them into candy cane shapes for Christmas. So these are so cute on top of a gift, so really cute little gift topper. But then what's also fun is that the person you're giving this little gift topper to can put it on their Christmas tree as an ornament. So it is a good multi-purpose little handmade gift, and handmade gifts are always the best. So let's get started. For this project, you need a few supplies, most of which you probably already have at home. A few you may need to grab at a craft store or on Amazon or something like that. But you'll probably already have yarn, so you can use yarn in any color, any texture. I actually prefer a little bit of a thinner yarn for these candy canes, just because the other one, like a thicker, chunkier yarn, makes the candy cane a little bit too chunky and thick, and then it kind of loses its look and shape. So I do prefer just sort of a typical acrylic yarn for this project. You'll also need some rope, or like macrame rope. So I have a few different varieties here. This is a really thick rope, which is kind of fun to use, and I actually ended up just using one strand out of this really thick one to make each candy cane. So I didn't make it this large, I only made it like one rope with thick. And then this is just some white rope from the craft store. I really like how this makes a candy cane, and for this one I use this whole strand. And then I've also really liked just this like kind of natural colored rope, and for this one I actually put, because it's a little thinner, I actually used two strands of this together to make my candy canes. So you'll need rope. You also need a little bit of wire. I just have a floral wire. If you have a wire like jewelry making wire, you could use that as well, just kind of whatever you have. The floral wire is just really inexpensive and easy to get. So I just already had some of that on hand, and so I'm using that. You'll need some really good scissors that will be able to cut through wire and cut through rope. So I use my heavy duty ones for this project. A little plastic yarn needle is also really handy for finishing up those edges. For being able to stitch things back in, I really like the plastic because it has a super huge eye, so you can come through either end, and it helps it when you have just little ends of yarn, because you don't have to like thread it first. You can put it in as you're going. And a little bit of Scotch tape to help hold everything together before you use your yarn. To begin, you need to have your rope and wire, some tape and scissors, and I'm going to use this natural looking rope for this candy cane. Now what you're going to need is because this is sort of a thinner rope, I am going to double this up. So I'm going to end up cutting two strands of this rope. You kind of want to bend this around and sort of see how like big you want your candy cane to be. And it totally can depend on you. I've done them in all different sizes, but that looks pretty good to me if I were to have it that length. So I'm going to cut it right here. And again, you want to have some pretty good scissors because rope is sort of hard to cut through. And then I'm going to actually cut down the middle so that we have the frayed end here as well. So we have our two strands. Now to make it more fluffy and fun at the ends, I'm actually going to take my rope apart so that it's in different separate little pieces. And I'm going to put it all back together, but I just want to take it apart so that it is a little more fluffy. It also helps the candy cane to just have a better shape, instead of, because sometimes if you leave them whole, when you wrap it with rope, it'll just kind of keep that weird, like, it'll look like two pieces of rope underneath your yarn. So we want to kind of fluff it up a little by actually taking these apart. Okay, and you kind of want to put them all back together in one long strand. So we're gonna add some wire to this. With my wrapped rainbows, I use no wire because when you're doing different arcs of a rainbow and stitching them together, they tend to just hold their shape really well on their own. You don't need any wire. But for this, because it's not being stitched to any other pieces, it needs to hold its shape by itself. And so we are going to add a little bit of wire to this project. Now, you don't want to go all the way to the end of your rope because that will show. So I like to start probably about an inch or so from the end, and then probably an inch or so from over here, and that's gonna just go in the middle of my rope. And we're gonna trim the ends too, so you want to make sure you give yourself enough space so that you still have room to trim your top and bottom when you're done. This wire, this floral wire, isn't very thick, and so just to make it a little more bendable, I'm going to actually use 2 pieces of this floral wire. So we just want about the same size. Now, if you have a thicker wire, you probably only need to use 1. So that will be perfect. And that's going to actually go in the center of our ropes. Now, to keep this all together so that it's easier for wrapping up, we're going to kind of hold it in place. And I'm going to use tape. And it doesn't even have to be perfect because you're going to cover the tape up anyway. So this is just to keep the wires and all the little strands of rope together. Okay, so there's one wrapped up piece. You just want to make sure you get those wires kind of in there. It's a little tricky. This is actually probably like the trickiest part, is to hold it all together and make sure you're getting it all in there. So we're gonna wrap a little tape around there. And the nice thing is if like a wire, if it is just being unruly and wants to sneak its way out, you can kind of poke it back in and fix it that way. So there we go. We're ready to move on to wrapping up our rope. Okay, to begin this part of our candy cane, we're going to start wrapping yarn around our fun little rope bundle that we've made. So for this part with the end, I always like this end because this knot is going to be able to be hidden really well. So we're going to just tie a knot, and again, leave, I don't know, about, not probably quite an inch, but like 3/4 of an inch to an inch of yarn at the bottom, because again, we're going to trim. Now you can see that some of my little wires are trying to stick out down there. We can trim those at the end. So don't worry if they're like at the top or the bottom. I might even just try to shove them back down the other way so they're not showing quite as much. But you just make a knot, and you're going to knot directly onto your rope. Okay, now this piece can get hidden as we start to wrap our yarn around, and it's really as simple as it sounds. You are going to actually, I don't want to get all those ends in there, you are going to just wrap, and you're going to do this sort of firmly. You want this to be a pretty tight wrapping, because that way it will actually be more flexible. Like, the tighter it is, the more flexibility you get. Now as we get to, I'm at my piece of tape, you're just going to wrap directly over the tape. You might have to sort of get that little edge in there. I actually like to wrap even tighter over my tape because it sort of makes it want to bulk out a little bit. So if we wrap a little tighter around the tape, it holds it in and sort of keeps the same dimension. So you can see I'm just trying to tightly, and you want it to just be right next to the strand, the little wrapped part before it. So I'm going to continue doing this, and as you can see too, this was our tail from where we knotted our yarn. That's going to just be wrapped up as we go along, and I'm just going to continue to do this all the way to the end. You will see me switch directions because I feel like once I get to halfway, it's easier to just flip it around and start wrapping the other direction. So I'm going to continue wrapping this all the way to the end. All right, and here at the end, and I'm actually going to trim my yarn, and I'll show you how to finish this up. I like to leave a long end so that it lets me have a lot to work with as I'm trying to make a knot and get it back into our little rope bundle. Okay, so at the end, we're going to tie a knot. Now what I like to do is kind of wrap it all the way around, leaving myself a little loop so that I can get one part, like a knot like that goes all the way around. And then for the second part, I just do a regular little knot at the end. Now there are multiple things you can do with this end of yarn. If you like kind of a like shabby chic kind of look, you can actually just trim it down and leave the end loose, and it would still be super cute on your candy cane. If you are doing this with kids, what you could do is actually just do a little hot glue dab like right here and kind of stick that down, trim it off. It would look great. Another way that you can do this is using your yarn needle. You just thread it through, and then you actually put your needle through some of this yarn that we just went through. You kind of have to fight because we went tight. We went tight with our yarn, and you're gonna just hide the end underneath some of your yarn and then trim. And that's what I did for a lot of mine, just because it sort of makes it a little neater. You can probably trim even shorter on there, but that's what I have done with that one. So now we're going to actually start putting our stripes on our candy cane. Okay, for this part of our candy cane, this is the decoration part. So we are adding our stripes to our candy cane now. We are going to tie on another color of yarn, just like we did at the beginning of our candy cane. So we're just going to actually make a knot on here, and this end we can do the exact same thing. We can either hot glue it, or we can like stitch it back in at the end, or you can leave it loose, however you prefer that to look. And then we will just start wrapping, and however thick you want your stripes to be, you can leave more space in between, you can make it really tight. This is where it gets kind of fun, and you can use your creativity to make these candy canes really unique. So what I did on some of them was actually did a double layer. And then once you get to the end, you're going to do the same thing and tie it off. And then we'll talk in a minute about how to bend it. So as I was saying earlier, you can leave your candy cane just like this, or you can add another like contrasting stripe, like see how I did on this, to make another layer. And this is the fun part, is to make your candy cane shape. So you can just bend it and kind of see how it looks the best. And as you can see also, I ended up stitching my ends of my green back into the yarn. I think that looks pretty good. And then you just are going to trim your ends so that they are even. And we'll trim this guy a little bit too. And that is it. But this is where you can get really creative too. You could use like gold to sort of trim this up. If you want to add a little hook to the top so that you can hang it that way from a tree, you can. I think you can just hang it directly on the tree though as well. But I promise once you start making these, you're going to want to make a million in all the color combinations, and you can make all of your Christmas gifts look beautiful and your tree look beautiful. And I hope you have a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.